welcome everyone. So welcome to OnCrawl's SEO in Orbit webinar series. This is the first ever series sending SEO into space. So before I introduce what we're going to do today, I'd like to say feel free to ask your questions in the chat bar if you are already in there listening us. So because JP will be answering your question after the discussion. So SEO in Orbit is a series of webinars running through June 2014 and taking you on a trip through the galaxy of the technical SEO. So go ahead and watch these webinars. After each webinar, join us on Twitter to vote for the top tips that you get from us, and we'll send all of these top tips into space, I mean for real, on June 27th. So, I mean, you can get yourself updated on Twitter, and the hashtag is OnCrawl in Orbit to join this. You can get more information on OnCrawl's website, oncrawl.com/SEO in Orbit for more information. So today, the topic is creating entity-based content that converts. It's going to be a really interesting topic to talk about. So a brief information about myself. My name is Murat Yatağan, and I'll be hosting today's episode. So I'm an OnCrawl ambassador, and I've been an SEO consultant for about like 4 years with more than 10 years of experience in general on SEO and UX. So 5 of it actually comes from my role at Google. I was working there in the web spam team, in search quality team, and currently I'm also vice president of growth of Brainy, which is the world's biggest online education community for children, parents, and teachers connecting each other to help understand the questions. So today, my guest is JP Sherman for talking about creating entity-based content that converts. Let me give you a little bit interaction about himself. He has more than 10 years experience of search, findability, and competitive intelligence. He's working at search and findability expert for. He's working as expert for the Red Hat customer portal. So he's bridging the intention gap between tens of thousands of technical and support documents and the customers looking for them in Google and inside Red Hat's huge internal search platform. So he has been helping many clients like Paramount Studios, Skechers, Performance Bike, DeWalt, and many more for connecting the data, behaviors, search and findability issues. So you can find him on Twitter at JP Sherman, so he's very active in there. And now I'd like to ask JP to give a little bit more introduction about himself and give more background information. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the introduction. First of all, I'm incredibly pleased and honored to be here, to have been asked, and it's about a topic that I can literally ramble on for hours about. Just a real brief background. I started my career in search when I was in special operations, psychological operations, which is about information dissemination, and my particular areas of dissemination were malaria prevention and humanitarian demining efforts in Southeast Asia. So that's kind of how I first started to get into how people consume and find and consume information online. I've worked for several big agencies. I've worked for a couple of small agencies. I've worked for many, many different verticals, in-house SEO, consultant, and I really and then I got recruited to build a search engine for video games. And that's the very first time I got inside the guts of a real search engine, figuring out relevancy models, tuning models, and how people find information. So I've always been an SEO, but I've been kind of moving towards the concept of findability, which is how do people look for, recognize, and select the information that is found. So searching is just one part of the behavior, but how do they recognize it? How do they select it? And then how do they consume it are the other parts of that behavior. And entities are a big factor in how people find, consume information. So, and I do that at Red Hat, which is a software development company, an enterprise software development company with an open source model. So we sell free software, essentially, which sounds kind of crazy, but the people get subscriptions to use that. So part of that open source methodology is how I treat information. I share what I know. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. So I'm super excited to go through the discussion. But before we start our discussion with JP, I'd like to go over a couple of terms because we're going to use them in the discussion many times. So like today, these key terms that we would like to explain before we start the discussion is the entities, structured data, and schema.org. So JP, could you explain what are entities?
So really simply, entities are things that have attributes. For example, animals have, a dog has legs, it has a heart, it has things. It is a thing that has things. They're not always concepts, but also brands can be entities because they are associated with products. They are associated with media and other things. So an entity is a thing that has attributes. And what makes it interesting is that there are shared attributes. A dog and a cat have shared attributes. So once you start digging down into what an entity is, it's the attributes that really define and differentiate what the thing is. And so that's kind of what creates an entity.
Thank you very much. And the other two, let me go through them, that we have structured data. So it's, as the name suggests, it's the information that you got to structure and organize on your page to help mainly the search engines to understand what your content is about, but also it serves the purpose to users, to the visitors to your website as well, because in the front end, you also organize your information in a better readable fashion, like the lists, tables, and so on. But for search engines to make more sense, what they use is they have this knowledge graphs. So they create this knowledge bases by getting the like the entities as JP just defined, and then associating them so what they are about. For example, the structured data is by Google. It's being used to create a new search appearances, which is one of them is the newest one is the QA page, and also Google just announced FAQs. They're also known as rich results in general. I just gave two examples. So these search appearances, of course, give you some advantage on the, make you more prominent in the search engine result pages, but also gives a lot of other advantages that we are going to talk about them in our discussion. And the last one is the schema.org. So this is a standard that is developed by search engines as consortium, like not only Google, but Bing, Yandex, they like Yahoo all contributed into that. So these are like the foundations of how to build this structured data in a way that search engines can understand them better. So there are a lot of encodings that there's this website, schema.org, and you can check it out. So it will give you, it will provide you the information that you need to use to structure your data. And then you can structure the data by using techniques like JSON-LD or microdata. So like let's not make it even more complex. These are the foundational information that we wanted to touch a little bit before we go into the discussion. And now I'd like to start with our really good topic today. So the first question I'd like to ask you, JP, is that, I mean, you are a findability expert. Can you explain if, I mean, are there biological constraints on how people search?
Yes. So there's kind of a two-part answer. First of all is the concept of accessibility. Not everyone sees colors the same way. Not everyone can consume information in the same way. So accessibility is a huge factor in findability. Being able to present information to a standard to an audience that has variations in how they consume information. So things like text size, colors, location, and things like that are very, very important to the concept of findability. And Google has said, and there are some strong correlations. I don't want to imply that there are causations, but there's some very strong correlations with the better accessible your site is. We kind of go back to what Marie Haynes has been talking about in expertise, authority, and trust, the EAT concept. So the more accessible the site is, there's a level of authority and expertise that is applied to the site, which gives it a higher kind of EAT. I don't want to call it a ranking because that really implies some sort of scale. But that's the first part, is accessibility. The second part of the biological constraint is humans are essentially pattern-seeking animals. We see patterns when there are no patterns. And there's a term called pareidoia, which means that humans see something like a face in a tree. There's no face there, but people look for data. They look for patterns. And so part of that, so we're not just pattern recognizing, we're also pattern searching. So when it comes to findability, there are certain concepts and certain biological aspects to understanding how people interact with it, specifically like their environment or even a web page. The way that they scan for information is fairly predictable. The way that they recognize information is fairly predictable. And so humans start looking for that pattern. And entities, because entities are recognizable things, entities stand out as pattern signals. So when somebody comes in and is looking for information and they see, let's say, Batman, all of a sudden a person understands that Batman is associated with a location, friends, enemies, movies, media, and all these different things. So that whole thing coalesces in entity recognition. Once a user understands and recognizes that entity, this thing that they're looking at is an entity, it creates what's called an information scent trail, which means that this is something that they start to focus on to see, does this feel like it's getting closer to the thing that I'm searching for, essentially the user intent. So when it comes to biology, there are some real factors in how people consume the information, which is accessibility, and how people recognize and then follow that information. And a lot of that is based on things like entity recognition from a human perspective and pattern recognition and pattern searching.
Really good explanation. Like 10 years ago, I started my career as a researcher at university, and my focus was neural network programming. So when machine learning was not a thing back then, it was neural networks. And if I would have got the foundations like this, if you would have been a professor of mine, I think I would have been a better researcher. That was a great explanation.
Thank you.
So, as you know, like Google has been putting a lot of efforts in the past years to move forward to these neural search by using this neural language processing, the queries, to understand in better ways the content, and plus to also fight against the spam issues on the search engine result pages. So, and the last thing also, which is the biggest challenge of Google, because almost 70% of the searches every day happening is something new to Google, like they've never seen that before, and they have to find answers for these things. So in your opinion, is there a particular change in recent years that has made a huge difference in how we find information?
Yes. So I'm going to try to kind of keep it brief because there are a lot of different tracks that Google has done and search and findability has really kind of incorporated. So the first thing has been really understanding the individual and their patterns. For example, when I leave to go to work in the morning, the first thing I get is it's going to take you 10 minutes to get to your local cafe. I don't have any digital interaction with this particular cafe, but my phone knows that I always stop at this cafe. And so it tells me that's how long it's going to take to get there. And that is incredibly helpful. So that is a non-input learning feature. So part of that is understand. So the point that I'm trying to get about is that understanding context, being able to be aware of and understand context in a predictable and displayable way to give me some non-interruptive information. The second part of that is that I really got to give a shout out to Dawn Anderson. She is a brilliant person who knows a lot about information retrieval, findability. She said something the other day about you can tell what a word means by the company it keeps, which was, I wish I was clever enough to have said it in that way, because that is so true about not only just entity recognition, about, I think that SEOs in the past, and there's still a little bit of habitual training in the past about treating keywords as essentially a bag of words. And you type this bag of words in without context, and I think too many SEOs really focus on the bag of words idea or concept or tactic. When you start understanding that, words will tell you who they are by the company that they keep, you understand that words mean things. Words mean more things in context of other words. Words are associated with entities, and then you start getting into the data that mobile networks and other past searches and other past visits give a more contextual picture. So my searches are going to be very, very different than somebody else's because my context is very different. One example that I kind of use to kind of drive this home is that I used to do SEO for a large online bicycle company. And it was fascinating because the same keyword, bike tires, had a different implication in Colorado Springs than in Los Angeles. In Colorado Springs, the intent was generally mountain bike tires. In LA, it was road bike tires. But the keyword itself was the exact same keyword, bike tires. And so understanding that the same word can have a bifurcated intent among user groups in a location context is really, to me, it was incredibly illuminating to not just develop content for that particular type of audience, but how do I click on an emotional level from a search perspective to get that interest. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna tell just a real brief story.
Go ahead.
So what we did was, so our site had never ranked for the term road bikes. And so I was looking at the search engine results page, and it was all the winners were road bikes dash brand, road bikes pipe brand, road bikes dash brand. And so I thought this was crap. So I went in, I changed our road bikes title tag, just the title tag, that was my control, to lightweight, fast bikes for the open road. And so that started getting me into the idea that I'm optimizing for intent and I'm optimizing for emotion. And when you consider the fact that a user generally spends less than a second considering each snippet, you have to capture that intention. You have to give them essentially an immediate perception of value. And when a user is looking at road bikes dash brand or lightweight and fast bikes for the open road, or when it comes to kids bikes, affordable, durable bikes for kids, it captures two really central concerns, like, is this going to cost me? And is this going to last a long time? So when I started optimizing for emotion and the immediate recognition of value from the SERP perspective, it became less of a bag of words and more about optimizing for the click-through, using the right words, targeting the right intention, and for keywords that we had never ranked #1 for, boom, we were above REI, we were above Target, we were above Walmart. And that, while your mileage may vary, but I think that the battle in the future for SEO, and especially specifically the SERP, is going to be fighting for that immediate recognition of value, be it position 1 or position 4. If you can immediately convey the intent through words from your content, you're going to start. That's a win. That's a real winning strategy.
This is a great story. Thank you very much for sharing with us, because I really like how like we were talking about these conceptual things, and now you also made it like practically this success story behind it, and the technique that you just defined is not like regular that you can find everywhere, but you're questioning what is like, oh, term frequency, did you do TF-IDF, WDF? I mean, you can, but thinking that you suggested is about humans. Like why would we ever search that looks at this question? And then this also gives credit to Google, saying probably Google is also not just looking at the team, like term frequencies. They probably also like has all these thousands of amazing engineers that are working on how human mind works and how can we satisfy the, the query intentions they have. So regarding to that, like Google has this connection between the words to concepts, and I like to ask, does the kind of content that ranks with these neural matching algorithms look different from the content that ranks for keywords?
Short answer, yes. I think that when a neural match is applied, so obviously I don't work at Google. I don't build these systems, but from my observations and from some of the small scale tests that I've run, it seems to me that there needs to be some sort of trigger for the neural network to recognize a level of context and entity. If I'm looking for red shoes, that's not an entity. And then it can be assumed that if I'm looking for red shoes, I'm probably in an e-commerce mindset. So my guess is that there's some sort of recognition factor from the keyword. Are they looking for information? Are they looking for something to purchase? And so a high level assumption of what the user is looking for. So when it comes to things like red shoes, it is much more direct, it is much more discrete. However, if I'm looking to, what was the search that and of course my mind goes blank of all the searches that I do, but like if I'm looking how to repair carpet from water damage, there are several concepts that need to be undertaken. And less so even that, another example that I use is I really liked was when you search for the movie that makes fun of Star Wars, the first result is going to be Spaceballs. And a lot of this is my suspicion is that Google understands that movie, it recognizes that as a type of media that makes fun of is synonymous with parody, and parodies are not the thing, but like the thing. So the query, the movie that makes fun of Star Wars, they're looking for a movie that is not Star Wars, but is like Star Wars, that is a parody. And in searching other search engines, I always get Star Wars content, but in Google, I get Spaceballs. And I'm sure there are links associated with this, but that to me tells me that Google is doing some pretty high level parsing, doing some high level recognition of the type of query, and then being able to apply synonyms that can have certain nuances that can change the result.
Well, I agree, because do you remember the when Google introduced knowledge graphs? So it's not a thing now, but 7 years ago, Google introduced the knowledge graphs, and this is how they started building these. Right-hand side, there's Wikipedia, or so yeah, there's a concept behind this, and it's probably something like that.
Well, the fascinating thing about the knowledge graph is, so I think I mentioned that I went to college for evolutionary biology, so like taxonomies and cladistics are kind of my thing. I probably talk about dinosaurs way too much on Twitter, but you know, I don't really have a personal brand yet. So the thing about knowledge graphs is that using the structured data that we were talking about through schema.org, it creates a horizontal relationship layer of shared characteristics. So whales, humans, gorillas, most mammals have like the five fingers and the bones, the three-boned finger with 5 fingers, even bats. So that is that's a shared characteristic among different entities. So part of what the structured markup has done is it's given Google a level of this kind of horizontal relationship between different entities that started building that knowledge graph. And then, and I think I'm right about this, but like these knowledge graphs weren't curated. There was essentially like there was an algorithm that searched Google to fill in gaps of templates. So for example, the knowledge graph for Morgan Freeman, if it didn't have a birth date as a part of that knowledge graph, the knowledge graph program would search Google and then kind of figure out a consensus of what Morgan Freeman's birthday was, just to fill in the template for that particular like famous person, actor template. And this is the kind of thing that structured markup really helps with. I like to call structured markup kind of machine learning food, because with machine learning, despite some of the marketing fluffery around that term, machine learning can really only work as well as it is fed. It has to consume data, and if you're getting a product that has machine learning, you need to understand, look at the structured data, look at the data on your site. What is that machine going to consume? Because otherwise your improvements could be, good, but if you don't have the right data that the machine needs to consume, it's not going to feel hugely significant, if that makes sense.
That's totally making sense. When I was at the web spam team, there was actually a lot of machine learning pipelines were being built, and the fundamental concept behind that is what kind of data you are sending in, like the signals, are they coherent enough, and do they make sense all together, so that the output you get can be in a good confidence interval. So otherwise, whatever output is not going to be very helpful. So that's why I really like the idea that you just said, wanted to highlight the value you bring to your visibility, or in general findability of your website with structured data, is extremely important, because it is if you give the right signals to the search engines to understand what the content is about, there will be a prize about it. But if you mix it up, then also a mixed up piece of application, or it will not be very, helpful in general. So regarding to that, as we are talking about this entity database, which is the way to structure the information, Google recognizes all sorts of different types of structure in the content, and they also create featured snippets, not only the rich snippets, like rich results that are directly being triggered by the signals that you provide with structured data and markups, but the featured snippets are also using many other things on the website. So what are your suggestions, the best ways to organize your content to increase the chances of getting a feature snippet?
I think there's a really good person. His name is AJ Crone. He really likes calling Google just like a clever 5-year-old. And I really like the concept of the clever 5-year-old. You know, they're clever, but they're also 5, so a little bit lazy. And so for me, in terms of kind of getting these rich snippets in the featured spots, this is about explaining information in simple ways, in clear ways, that is supported through like an ordered list. So there's a lot of I know that Stone Temple does a lot of research on this type of information, and the basic takeaways that I get from it is that the better you're able to answer a question clearly and concisely, organized in a way that can be immediately, here again, we're talking about the immediate recognition of value, in a way that can be immediately recognized as valuable, and then supported. While structured markup is not required for these kind of featured snippets, it definitely helps. And I think that the way that structured markup helps when it comes to like featured snippets is that not so much Google comes in and says, oh, you've got structured markup, good for you, here's a star, and here's a featured snippet. It's more about Google comes in, understands the concept and understands the entity a little bit better because you've put in structured markup, and because Google understands it better, because it's clear to Google and to the user, that then you have a much higher chance of getting featured in that snippet. I don't have any really, other than kind of anecdotal information about getting higher click-through rates, but the overarching concept that I try to communicate to the teams that I work with internally and when I'm speaking is speed. Just really understanding that you want a human to be able to understand what you're talking about in less than 1 second. If they completely get what you're saying in less than a second, then you are quickly, essentially, you're creating this information set trail. You're saying, follow this information because I've given you this little piece of data that matches what you're looking for. So I would say that, again, the immediate perception of value is probably one of the more important things to optimize click-through rate from a very tactical standpoint.
Yeah, totally agree. I like to add like a short line into this one. I also think like it helps these devices like voice recognition devices and all things also give users like a more valuable information instead of just like saying some random description or title maybe that has not been written in the best possible way. Plus, I've seen that they might be also very helpful in new things that Google and other search engines are introducing. For example, last thing was the discover, which is not a big thing now. Not many users, I guess, because I'm looking at my stats on Search Console. Not a lot of click that I get from there, and there's no impression much. But I mean, it's a developing, like, it's a shift. So I believe you, yeah, that we've given really like actionable advice here. So, do you have like a favorite technical SEO trick in general? Like, let's give our audience a little bit of,
I think my favorite technical SEO trick is surrounding myself with smarter people than me.
That is amazing.
I mean, and it's true because I personally don't like being called an expert because I don't really feel like I am, but I do have a lot of experiences that I love to share. And there are people that I am friends with. There are so many really fantastic peers who are also very willing to help. I think I'll rephrase that. I think my biggest technical secret is being able to recognize what you need and put it in a good question. And it sounds, hella cheesy, but I mean, I need to be able, it's like forming a good query, essentially. I know that there are some people who are amazing at JavaScript. I know there are people who are amazing at Python. There are people who are good at automating data and reports and things like that. And these are all things that I am okay at. But if I can form a question to ask them so that they can share their expertise that they have, then I think that is my tech SEO secret.
Great.
Also site speed. Site speed is also but everyone knows that.
Yeah, I like the word that you say, like hiring or working with like smarter people. That's, yeah. I also believe that if you are like the average of the people that is mostly surrounding yourself, like let's say you have 5 people that you see day-to-day basis for work, you are the average of them. So it's a really good advice that you gave. So 2 quick questions.
Sorry.
Do you have a favorite Google bot, and what's your favorite planet?
So I think I don't really have a favorite Google bot. I treat them all. I love them and I hate them. So I don't really have a favorite Google bot. However, my favorite planet that I have is totally make believe, and it is the planet of Tatooine.
Oh, cool. It's perfect. Well, JP, we had an amazing discussion. Thank you very much for your time. Let's look if we have any questions. Yeah, I'm checking our chat now to see. Where are they? Yes. So Calvin Scott is asking, what are your hunches on Google is algorithmic determining SERP-based intent?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question real quick?
Yeah, it says, what are your hunches on how Google algorithmically is determining SERP-based intent?
Okay. So there's okay. First of all, that's a fantastic question. Secondly, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think when it comes to SERP-based intent, I think that there's a level of historical data that needs to be consumed. 2, I think that there is maybe it's time for me to put on my tinfoil hat, but I really think that because Google controls Chrome and it controls Android, while the user data is anonymized, I think that there's a lot of data mining of user behaviors and user patterns behind the scenes on a platform level as opposed to an algorithmic level. So I think that Chrome sends data, I think that Android sends data, and I think that it looks at the information that it collects on their platforms and in their environments to see that when users are looking for X, that they generally go towards this particular thing. There's also a really, really kind of fantastic challenge that I face with, because the thing that I really, really kind of love is site search. Is how the search engine on your site actually works, from e-commerce to the Solar, Elasticsearch, all these great things. And I look at things like keyword refinements. So one of the things that I don't know, but I suspect Google does, is really take a look at keyword refinements. If they search for X, if they search for something, and then they come back and then they search for something else, is that a brand new search? Is it a second search, or is it a refinement of the original search? And so there needs to be some sort of language processing ability to say that, okay, we recognize that there is an entity in this search, and let's say 80% of this search has a we're talking about structured data, has that horizontal relationship between the concepts in the first search, so they can treat that as essentially a refinement. So I think that there's a level of platform intelligence that's happening. I think that there's a very sophisticated definition of how keywords can be refined in Google. And generally, I would think that there would be like, here's the most popular search, and here are like 30 related searches that may be similar. And you kind of see that as part of display, where when you've looked at a particular SERP, you've seen the related SERPs as part of the natural search result pack. So I think Google is essentially kind of disambiguating that particular query and forcing people to click on a recommended search as opposed to coming back and refining the search. So I think it's a clever business solution. I don't know if I answered that question. I feel like I kind of rambled a little bit, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I think it was a really nice qualitative way of answering that question. So thank you for asking the question, and thanks a lot for your answer. So we are coming to the end of our webinar, which was so nice. I personally really enjoyed that. And I'd like to say a couple last words. Well, again, thank you a million times, JP. It was great having you today. So don't forget to vote for JP's best tips from this webinar on Twitter. The hashtag is OnCrawl in orbit. So thanks for being with us today. And we'll be traveling through the corner of the technical SEO space. So you can go through by OnCrawl.com. So there's this free trial. You can have a look at your status of your website when it comes to all the things that we have been speaking during this webinar. And join us for the next episode of SEO in Orbit, which is going to happen in May 23rd. And it's about internal links, and links make the world go around. So, and our guest is Julie Joyce. So
she's awesome. She's amazing. Yeah. I know her. She's awesome.
I'm looking forward. Yeah, we are. It was a great occasion to have you here, and so we're saying goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.